Ada knew the moment she stepped off the wagon and saw the bunkhouse door hanging open, something on the Caldwell land had gone badly wrong. The smell reached her first: old smoke, spoiled grain, and the particular sourness of a place where men had lived without care. She had ridden 3 days from Boise City to reach this ranch, and she had spent every mile rehearsing the conversation she intended to have. She had the deed in her satchel, folded twice and tucked beneath her mother's old Bible. The land was hers now. Her late husband Gerald had won it at cards, and then Gerald had died of a fever before he ever set boot leather on it. And now the question of what to do with 500 acres of high-range cattle land in southern Idaho fell entirely to her. She was 31 years old, and she intended to handle it with good sense. What she had not expected was the boy sitting on the porch steps. He was perhaps 10, maybe slight enough to seem younger, with sun-darkened arms and a pair of boots that had been resoled so many times they looked like they'd been built by a committee. He was not crying. He was doing something more difficult than crying. He was sitting perfectly still, the way a person sits when they have learned that making a fuss changes nothing. A flour sack of belongings rested between his feet. Ada climbed down from the wagon without waiting for help. "You belong to this ranch?" she asked. The boy looked up at her steady. "My mother did. She was the cook. She died in February." He said it the way a child says a thing he has had to say many times. "Mr. Hess said there's no place for a boy without a mother to earn his keep. He said I ought to walk to town." Ada looked at the boy, then at the open bunkhouse door, then back at the boy. She set her satchel down on the step beside him. "What's your name?" "Eli." "All right, Eli. Don't go anywhere." She walked through that bunkhouse door with her spine straight and her jaw set, and the conversation she was about to have with Mr. Hess was nothing like the one she had rehearsed. The foreman was a broad man, thick through the shoulders, with a manner that suggested he was accustomed to being the largest fact in any room. He was seated at a plank table with a ledger and a tin cup of coffee, and he did not stand when Ada entered. That told her most of what she needed to know about him. "You'd be the widow," he said. "I'd be the owner," Ada said. "Ada Caldwell. The deed is in my satchel, and I'm happy to show it to you, though I suspect you already know who I am." Hess leaned back in his chair and studied her with the flat appraisal men like him reserved for livestock and women they considered obstacles. Gerald Caldwell never worked a day of ranch life in his 37 years. No offense to the dead. None taken. He was a terrible rancher and a passable husband. But the land passed to me, and I mean to run it. On your own. That remains to be seen. She pulled out a chair across from him and sat without being invited. "I'd like to see the books." Hess pushed the ledger toward her with 2 fingers. The way a man pushes something toward someone he expects won't understand it. Ada opened it and read it carefully. She had kept the accounts for her father's dry goods store from the age of 14. She understood ledgers considerably better than Hess appeared to realize. What she found in those pages made something cold settle in her stomach. Cattle tallies that didn't match the head count from the previous owner's records. Supply invoices that ran 30% higher than they ought to, and 3 months of wages paid to a hand named D. Hess, who appeared to be the foreman's brother, though no such man appeared on the work roster. She closed the ledger. "I'd also like you to explain the situation with the boy on the porch." Hess shifted. "The cook's kid, no relation to the ranch. Mother's buried on the south pasture, which is sentiment I don't have the payroll to indulge." Ada folded her hands on top of the ledger. "The boy stays. You do not. Mothrace, you do not." She let the silence stretch one full breath before she continued. "I'll pay you 2 weeks' wages, and I'll ask you not to make this any harder than it needs to be. The hands who want to stay on and work under honest terms are welcome. The supply contracts are being renegotiated, and D. Hess, whoever he is, is removed from the payroll as of this morning." Hess stood. He was a big man, and he meant the standing to mean something. Ada did not move. She had grown up behind a counter in a rough territory town. She had watched her father face down men twice his size with nothing but a steady voice and a refusal to be impressed. She found now that she had inherited more from him than his ledger skills. "You'll have trouble running this place alone," Hess said. "I expect I will," she said pleasantly. "Good morning, Mr. Hess." He left before noon. Ada watched him ride out from the porch steps, where Eli was still sitting with his flour sack. She sat down beside the boy and they watched the dust settle together. "Is he coming back?" Eli asked. "No," Ada said. "He is not." Eli considered this. "What happens to me now?" Ada looked out at the land. Rolling brown grass, a sky so blue it seemed freshly painted, mountains in the far distance wearing their last caps of snow, 500 acres, a house that needed repair, a cook's quarters off the back of the kitchen, a graveyard with one new mound in the south pasture. "You'll stay here," she said. "You can help in the kitchen until we figure out something more permanent. Can you cook anything?" "Biscuits," Eli said. "And beans, Ma taught me." "Then you're ahead of me," Ada said. "I can manage beans, but my biscuits are a tragedy." That was the first time she heard him laugh. What Ada needed now, with a ranch to run and a ledger to untangle and a boy to feed and spring roundup looming in 6 weeks, was a foreman she could trust. What the territory of southern Idaho offered her in response to that need, as it happened, was Jonas Hale. She did not find him through an advertisement, though she placed one in the Boise paper out of duty. She found him through Reverend Oakes at the small whitewashed church in the town of Meridian Crossing, 12 miles down the valley road. She had driven in to file paperwork at the county clerk's office and stopped at the church on Eli's suggestion. The boy had attended Sunday services with his mother and felt the loss of that routine in a way Ada respected. Reverend Oakes was a thin, deliberate man who chose his words the way a careful cook chooses spices, sparingly and with intention. When Ada explained her situation after the service, he listened without interrupting, which was itself a kind of gift. "I know a man," the Reverend said. "Good man, best foreman this county ever had, till Rocking Tea sold out from under him last autumn. He's been doing day labor. It's a waste." "Is he honest?" Ada asked. "He returned a wallet once with $80 in it. Is he capable?" "He rebuilt a barn roof in 4 days after a lightning fire. Alone." "Is he difficult?" The Reverend paused just long enough to be truthful. "He's quiet. Some people mistake that for difficult. It isn't the same thing." Ada said she'd like to meet him. 2 days later, Jonas Hale came to the Caldwell Ranch on a gray horse with a working man's saddle and a bedroll tied behind. He was perhaps 35, lean in the way that comes from honest labor rather than deprivation, with hands that showed every year of ranch work and eyes the color of creek water in autumn, clear, still, and deeper than they appeared. He took his hat off when he came to the porch, which Ada noted. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "Reverend Oakes sent me. He spoke well of you. Come in and let's discuss terms." She poured coffee. Eli served the cups, with a gravity he'd adopted since the day Ada gave him kitchen duties, and stationed himself at the end of the table with the look of someone who considered himself a participant in important proceedings. Jonas glanced at the boy without comment, which Ada also noted. She laid out her terms plainly: fair wage, plus room in the bunkhouse. She would handle the accounts. She needed him to handle the cattle and the hands. She wanted honest tallies, and she expected to review them weekly. She was not interested in being managed or placated. Jonas listened to all of this without shifting in his chair. When she finished, he said, "What happened to your last foreman?" "I dismissed him." "For cause?" Significant cause. Jonas nodded slowly. What do you know about running a cattle operation? It was a fair question, and Ada treated it as one. I know the accounts backward, and I learn fast. I'll tell you plainly when I don't know something. I expect the same from you. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the spring wind moved through the new grass with a sound like water. All right, Jonas said. I'll take the terms. Good. She extended her hand across the table. He shook it with a firm, brief grip, the way a man shakes another man's hand when he means what he says. Ada found she appreciated that more than she could have explained. They signed a paper, she had drawn it up herself, that laid out wages and duties, and the terms of separation should either party find the arrangement unsatisfactory. It was a business arrangement, thorough and unromantic, and it asked nothing of either of them that they had not already agreed to give. And yet when Jonas Hale tucked his copy into his shirt pocket and rose to go find the bunkhouse, Ada noticed that the kitchen felt different than it had an hour before. Less provisional somehow. Less like a place borrowed and more like a place that was beginning to belong to someone. Spring broke hard on the Caldwell Ranch, which Ada was learning was the natural disposition of Idaho springs. They arrived with the confidence of a lawsuit and the temperament of an argument. The ground, still half frozen an inch below the surface, turned to mud that sucked at boot heels and swallowed fence posts. 3 of the 6 remaining hands quit within the first week, citing the uncertain future of a ranch run by a woman they didn't know. Ada paid them their wages and did not argue. She had no interest in men who needed persuading to do honest work. Jonas replaced them steadily, one at a time, with men he knew from the rocking tea days and from his years of day labor across the valley, men who arrived with their own gear and a minimal requirement for being told they were important. By the end of the 3rd week, she had a crew she trusted, which Jonas had somehow assembled without any fuss that she could detect. He was, she discovered, a man of extraordinary efficiency and almost no decoration. He said what was necessary and nothing that was not. When she came to the barn at dawn to ask about the north pasture fence, he gave her a clear answer and a timeline. When she asked about the cattle count discrepancy in the old ledger, he walked her through his own count from the previous week, with the numbers written in a hand so careful she could have read it in poor light. He fixed a broken hinge on the kitchen door without being asked. He noticed that the water barrel on the south side of the house had a slow split in its stave, and repaired it on a Sunday afternoon. Eli followed him like a shadow. This had begun almost immediately, and Ada had watched it with something between amusement and a careful, measured hope. The boy was drawn to Jonas the way thirsty ground is drawn to rain, not desperately, not clinging, but with an unmistakable gravitational pull that suggested the boy recognized something in the man, that answered a need the boy would not have known how to name. Jonas accepted this with the same economy he brought to everything. He taught Eli to check the tension on a fence wire. He let Eli hold the lantern when he worked after dark. He never talked down to the boy, and he never talked up to him either. He simply talked to him, the way a person talks to another person. One evening Ada watched from the kitchen window as Jonas repaired a section of corral rail, with Eli handing him tools from a bucket, and something in her chest went quiet in a way it had not been quiet in a long time. But there was trouble coming. Ada felt it first in town. When she drove to Meridian Crossing for supplies, she saw the way conversation shifted when she entered the general store. Pearl Greer, who ran the store with her husband and had opinions about everything within a 15-mile radius, mentioned with elaborate casualness that the Idaho Land and Cattle Consolidation Company had been buying up small operations all across the valley. "Bought the Weaver place last month," Pearl said, measuring out flour with a little too much attention to the scoop. "And the old Henderson quarter section. They're building toward something. People say it's water rights. There's a canal project, government money behind it, or so folks say." Whoever holds the high ground and the creek rights will be sitting pretty. Ada drove home thinking hard. The Caldwell land sat on the high ground above Meridian Creek. The deed Gerald had won at cards was worth considerably more than anyone had told him, which meant it was worth considerably more than anyone had told Ada. That evening she laid the problem before Jonas on the porch steps as the sun went down behind the mountains. She told him everything Pearl had said, and then she told him what she had found when she looked more carefully at the original deed. The creek rights ran with the land, and they were substantial. Jonas listened with his elbows on his knees and his hat between his hands. "The consolidation company sent a man last week," he said quietly. Ada looked at him. "He came while you were in town, wanted to see the operation, said he was a cattle buyer." Jonas turned his hat once in his hands. He wasn't a cattle buyer. He asked too many questions about the waterway and too few about the cattle. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jonas was quiet for a moment. "I should have," he said. "I was trying to figure out what they were after before I worried you." "I don't want to be not worried," Ada said steadily. "I want to know what's happening on my land." He looked at her then. A direct look, not defensive, carrying something that might have been respect, that had just moved one step closer. "You're right. I won't do that again." They sat a moment with the evening coming in around them. "What do we do?" she asked. "Get to a lawyer before they do," Jonas said. "And don't sell a single acre to anyone for any reason, until you know exactly what those water rights are worth." He paused. "They may try to pressure. If they can't buy, they'll look for other ways." "What kind of other ways?" "Fences cut, cattle spooked, a fire that starts too easy." He said it without drama, the way a man states a weather forecast. "I've seen the consolidation company work before. 2 valleys over, 3 years ago. What happened there? The families that held on kept their land. The ones that panicked sold for 20 cents on the dollar." He looked out at the darkening grass. "This is good land, Mrs. Caldwell. Worth holding." Ada straightened her back. "Then we hold it." 3 weeks later, the fences on the east boundary were cut in 2 places. It was Jonas who found them at first light on a Tuesday. Jonas, who rode the line to assess the full extent, and Jonas, who came to Ada with the information before the hands had finished their breakfast. He had already identified where additional wire was needed and had a plan for doubling the watch on the east pasture that he presented to her as a suggestion, not a decision, waiting for her approval before he moved. She approved it. She also drove to Boise City that same week to see a lawyer named Cresswell, who had a reputation for being unmoved by large company men with confident manners. Cresswell reviewed the deed and the water rights and informed Ada that she was sitting on something the consolidation company had very badly miscalculated in not buying before Gerald Caldwell won it at cards. "What they want," Cresswell said, "is for you to believe you can't hold it alone. That's the whole strategy." He looked at her over his spectacles. "Can you hold it?" Ada thought of Jonas's even voice on the porch steps, of Eli handing tools from a bucket in the last of the afternoon light, of the biscuits they made together on Sunday mornings, the recipe Eli was slowly teaching her, flour on both their forearms, the kitchen smelling like something that had no word yet except home. "Yes," she said, "I can hold it." The consolidation company sent a representative to the ranch on a Thursday morning in late summer. He was a well-dressed man with a Cheyenne accent and a leather satchel, and he arrived at the house with an offer written on company letterhead, a generous offer, by most standards, with a condition that Ada vacate the property within 60 days. Ada read the offer at the kitchen table with Jonas standing by the stove and Eli, who had developed a talent for appearing in rooms where important things were happening, sitting at the end of the table with his arithmetic book open but his eyes decidedly not on his arithmetic. She set the paper down. "Tell your company," she said to the representative, that the Caldwell Ranch is not for sale at any price. If they have questions about the water rights, they can speak with my lawyer, Mr. Cresswell in Boise City. She stood. I'll also say plainly, the fences that were cut last month have been repaired. The east pasture is watched overnight, and I intend to file a formal complaint with the Territorial Land Office regarding the Consolidation Company's activities in this valley. You may take all of that back to whoever sent you." The representative looked at Jonas, possibly expecting a different reception from the man of the property. Jonas leaned against the stove with his arms crossed and said nothing. He did not need to. His expression was the end of that conversation. After the representative left, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then Eli said, without looking up from his arithmetic book, "He didn't even take his coffee." Ada laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that surprised her with its own existence. Jonas made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh she had heard from him, which was itself a small and unrepeatable gift. That evening, Jonas built a second chair for the porch. There had been one chair, Ada's, a wooden rocker that had come with the house. Jonas had sat on the porch steps on the evenings they talked, which had become a more frequent thing as the weeks accumulated. She had not asked him to build the chair. He had simply appeared with it on a Saturday evening, set it beside the rocker, and sat down in it without comment. Ada sat in the rocker, and they looked out at the land together. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. She turned to look at him. The last of the summer light was on the grass, turning it the color of old honey, and the mountains had gone to purple at their edges. "Jonas," she said, "can I ask you something plain?" "Yes." "Are you staying?" She meant it several ways, and she thought they both knew it. "Not as a business question. The paper we signed, I'm setting that aside. I'm asking something different." He was quiet for the length of time it takes the light to shift 1 degree on a mountain. Then he turned to look at her. "I built the chair," he said. It was not the longest answer. It was not the most elaborate. But Ada had learned by now that Jonas Hale's words carried exactly their own weight, and no less, and that 4 words from him were worth a speech from most men. She felt something in her chest open the way a window opens in early spring. Not suddenly, but with the particular relief of a thing that has been closed against the cold for a very long time, and is finally, carefully, allowed to let in the air. "The paper said either of us could end the arrangement with 30 days' notice," she said. "It did. I'd like to tear it up." Jonas looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. It was the thing that lives just behind a smile, in a man who has had few enough reasons for them that he does not spend them carelessly. "I'd like that too," he said. Eli appeared in the doorway behind them. He had a talent for materializing at significant moments that Ada had long since stopped attributing to coincidence. "Are we staying?" Eli asked. Ada reached back and held her hand out to him. He came and stood beside her chair, and she rested her hand on his shoulder, and the 3 of them looked out at the 500 acres of Idaho high range in the last good light of a summer evening. "We're staying," Ada said. The paper was torn up the following morning. In its place, over time, grew things that no paper could have held. A shelf Jonas built along the kitchen wall for Ada's books. A second pair of boots for Eli bought at the Meridian Crossing store without fanfare. A garden bed Ada broke and planted with a stubbornness that Jonas watched with admiring disbelief. A Sunday habit of biscuits and strong coffee, and the particular comfort of people who know where they are and who they are to each other. The Consolidation Company tried twice more through legal channels before Cresswell made it plain their water rights claim had no foundation. After that, they moved on to easier ground. The Caldwell Ranch stood. Ada kept the deed folded twice in her satchel, as she always had, but she moved her mother's Bible to the kitchen shelf, where it could be seen. It seemed right that it should be somewhere lived in and warm, rather than packed away for a journey that had already arrived at its destination. Now, if you have been listening tonight, you know what this story is really about. And it is not about water rights or land deeds or consolidation companies, though all of those things are real enough. It is about what happens when two people, worn down by separate kinds of loneliness, are honest enough to name what they need and brave enough to build toward it with their own hands. Ada needed someone who would stand beside her, not in front of her. Jonas needed a place worth standing in. Neither of them could have written down at the start exactly what the other was, but they were paying attention, and that made all the difference. Some arrangements begin as practicalities and end as the realest thing a person ever had. A contract is just words on paper. A second chair on the porch, that is a promise. If this story moved you, leave us a comment and tell us, have you ever found that the practical choice turned out to be the truest one? And if you want more stories from the old frontier, where hard people found their way to one another through hard times, please subscribe and come back. We have more journeys waiting. Good night. God bless each and every one of you.